So, um, I want you to picture a book for a second, but I don't want you to picture, a normal book that you tuck into your bag for a beach trip.
Right, right.
I want you to picture a physical object that weighs about 2.5 pounds. It is thick, it's dense, it's got 700 pages of text, and those pages are just covered in footnotes.
Yeah, and sometimes those footnotes have their own footnotes.
Exactly.
It is a literal doorstop. I mean, if you dropped this thing on your foot, you would absolutely break a toe.
We are talking, of course, about Bill Simmons, the Book of Basketball. And look, I know what the reaction usually is when people see this thing sitting on a table.
Oh, sure.
They see that bright orange cover,
Yeah.
they feel the pebbled texture like an actual basketball, and they think, well, this is just a sports book.
A stat book.
Right, they think it's for guys who sit in bars and argue about win shares and free throw percentages. And if we just leave it there, if we just categorize it as that big sports book, we're missing the point entirely.
Completely. I mean, if you treat this just as a sports book or like a collection of top 50 lists, you're reading it wrong.
Yeah.
This isn't just a ranking of players. This is a manifesto. It is a massive, sprawling cultural history. And honestly, it's a memoir about the nature of obsession.
Obsession, that is the exact word that keeps coming up for me.
Right. It's about how we remember things and, more importantly, how we fight this losing battle to keep those memories alive.
Which is really the core of our deep dive today. We have this massive stack of sources we're looking at: the foreword by Malcolm Gladwell, the prologue, and that wild first chapter.
Yeah, the Vegas chapter.
The Vegas chapter, exactly. And the mission here isn't to debate who the best player of all time is. That's not what we're doing. The mission is to understand the why.
The underlying motivation.
Yes. Why would a human being spend 3 years of their life writing 700 pages on this? Why does a random Tuesday night game in 1986 matter 40 years later?
And it's the why that really gets under your skin, because on the surface, it's absurd.
Totally absurd.
It's grown men in shorts throwing a ball into a metal hoop.
Why?
But as we dig into this source material, we realize it's actually about legacy.
Right.
It's about that specific, sweaty, heartbreaking history of the NBA, but it's also about our own lives and how we mark time.
And we are going to cover a ton of ground to get there. We're going to go from a $4 ticket that completely changed a family's destiny in 1973 all the way to a topless pool in Las Vegas.
Where the secrets of the universe were revealed.
The topless pool. We're definitely getting to that. It's probably the most unlikely setting for a philosophical breakthrough I've ever heard of.
It really is.
But let's start at the beginning, or rather, let's start with the person who introduces us to this entire world.
Oh,
Malcolm Gladwell writes the foreword.
Yeah, and he sets the stage in a really interesting way. He doesn't start with basketball at all.
No, he doesn't.
He starts with a job application.
It's such a great hook. Walk us through that.
So Gladwell talks about this period where Bill Simmons, who was just a columnist at the time, a very popular one, writing for ESPN Page 2, but still just a writer, started actively lobbying to become the general manager of the Minnesota Timberwolves.
I vaguely remember this.
Yeah.
It was like a running bit in his columns.
Right? That is how everyone took it. It was satire. He was writing these columns saying, hey, the Timberwolves are a disaster. The current GM is completely incompetent. You might as well hire me. I literally can't do any worse.
Yeah.
And Gladwell says he read these columns and laughed. He thought it was just Bill doing his shtick. Poking the bear, being the provocateur.
Because the logic, if you actually take it seriously, is insane.
Right.
Simmons lived in Los Angeles. He was writing for Jimmy Kimmel Live at the time. He had a great life in the sunshine. Why would he want to move to Minneapolis in the dead of winter to run a struggling basketball franchise?
Exactly. Gladwell breaks it down logically. He says, I thought he was kidding. But then Gladwell gets his hands on the manuscript for the Book of Basketball.
The early draft.
Right, the first draft. He reads it. He sees the depth of the research. He sees the microscopic level of detail. And he has this sudden realization. He says, oh, he wasn't joking.
he wasn't joking.
No. Simmons actually believed he could do a better job than the professionals. And the scary part is, after reading the book, Gladwell thinks he might be right.
That's the crazy part.
He realizes that Simmons isn't just a fan in the way you or I are fans. He's something else entirely. Oh, and the Minnesota front office actually received 12,000 emails supporting Simmons for the job.
12,000.
12,000.
That is a legitimate movement. That's not just a few guys on a message board.
It is a movement, and this leads Gladwell to deconstruct what makes Simmons different. Why does he have this kind of authority over the audience? And this is where Gladwell introduces a concept that I think is the single most valuable takeaway from the first 20 pages of the book.
Let's get into it.
The concept of cap room.
Cap room. It is such a perfect metaphor. I think we need to spend some time on this because it explains so much about adult life, honestly.
It really does. So
Yeah.
for the non-basketball listeners out there, in the NBA, cap room refers to the salary cap.
Right.
Every team has a strict limit on how much money they can spend on players. If you spend $30 million on a superstar, you can't spend that same money on a bench player. You have a budget. You have to make choices.
It's a fundamental resource constraint.
Exactly. But Gladwell applies this to real life. He talks about a friend of his named Bruce. He invites Bruce over to watch football on a Sunday. And Bruce says, well, I have to check with my girlfriend to see if I have cap room.
That is painfully relatable. I think every adult listening to this just nodded their head.
It is. It's the relationship salary cap. As normal adults, we have constraints, we have jobs, we have spouses, we have kids who need to be driven to soccer practice on a Saturday morning.
You have to mow the lawn.
You have to sleep at some point. We have a very limited amount of emotional and temporal currency to spend on sports.
You can't watch every game. It is physically impossible if you want to remain employed and married. You have to pick your spots.
Precisely. You have to pick and choose. Maybe you watch the playoffs. Maybe you watch your favorite team on Sundays. But you have to budget your time.
Right.
But Gladwell's argument, and this is so key to understanding the entire 700-page book, is that Bill Simmons does not have a cap.
He is operating with an unlimited budget.
Unlimited. Because watching sports is his job.
Yeah.
He has managed to completely merge his hobby and his livelihood. Gladwell paints this incredible picture of Simmons' life. He says if Simmons tells his wife, honey, I have to work late tonight, it doesn't mean he's filing paperwork.
Or sitting in a boring Zoom meeting.
Right. It means the Lakers game went into triple overtime.
That is the absolute dream. Sorry, honey, I can't come to dinner. LeBron is heating up.
It sounds like the dream, sure, but think about the output that allows for. Gladwell describes Simmons' home office. It's a converted garage with 5 flat-screen TVs mounted on the wall.
5.
5. He can watch 5 games simultaneously. He can track every single rookie, every substitution pattern, every timeout strategy.
So while Bruce is negotiating with his girlfriend for 3 hours on a Sunday just to watch one single game, Simmons is consuming 40 hours of content a week.
And that creates a massive informational asymmetry. Gladwell argues that this cap room allows Simmons to see things that even the actual general managers miss.
Because the GMs are busy.
Exactly. They're dealing with agents, they're dealing with travel logistics, negotiating with owners, HR issues. They aren't sitting around watching the Sacramento Kings play the Charlotte Bobcats on a random Tuesday night. Simmons is.
And this leads perfectly into that distinction between the insider and the fan. Because usually in journalism, we are told to trust the insider.
Right.
We're told to trust the guy who's actually in the locker room, the beat writer, the guy who flies on the team plane. We assume they know more because they are physically there.
And they do know some things more, obviously.
Yeah.
They know who's playing through an injury. They know who is secretly fighting with the head coach. But Gladwell argues that the insider status is actually a trap. It compromises you.
How so? Explain that trap for us.
Think about it. Access is a currency in that world. To be an insider, you need people to talk to you. You need Kobe Bryant to take your phone call. You need the coach to give you an exclusive quote for your story. You need the GM to leak you a trade rumor before the deadline.
Yeah.
And the minute you need something from them, you are beholden to them.
So you start self-censoring.
You have to. You start pulling your punches. You sit down to write and you think, well, I know this guy played a terrible game tonight, but he's a nice guy and I know his wife is sick. And if I rip him in the paper tomorrow morning, he won't talk to me next week.
Right. You become part of the machinery.
You lose your objectivity entirely because you are part of the ecosystem.
Whereas the fan, the outsider, doesn't care. Simmons doesn't care if Kobe Bryant likes him. In fact, he knows Kobe probably hates him.
And that liberates him. He isn't judging the player based on a personal relationship or a friendly conversation in a hotel lobby. He's judging him purely based on the tape. He's judging him based on the output on the floor.
Which brings us to the Random Tuesday standard.
Yes. This is the superpower. Gladwell calls it the Random Tuesday test. He says that while the rest of us are at work dealing with spreadsheets or whatever, Simmons is rewatching Game 5 of the 1986 Eastern Conference semifinals on a random Tuesday morning.
Just to check if his memory was right.
Just to verify. Literally just to see if Larry Bird actually made that specific pass, or if he just remembers Bird making that pass because the myth has grown so large over the years. That is the difference. The fan has the cap room to be obsessive in a way that the insider simply cannot afford to be.
It really reframes the authority of the whole book. It's not just a guy shouting opinions from a bar stool, which is what the cover won't make you think. It's a guy who has done the forensic work that we literally can't do because we have to go to our real jobs.
Correct. It's an expert system disguised as fandom. But to understand why he does this, because frankly, watching 1986 game tape on a Tuesday morning is not normal human behavior.
No, it is not.
We have to look at the origin story. We have to go to the prologue.
The section is called A $4 Ticket. And honestly, this story is so cinematic, it could be the opening scene of a movie.
It really could. So take us back. Set the scene for us.
It's 1973. We're in Massachusetts. And the context here is super important. The economy isn't great. Simmons' dad is a law student. He's working nights. They are grinding it out. They do not have disposable income. They are counting pennies.
Right.
And then, out of nowhere, a minor miracle happens. The IRS sends a tax refund.
The ultimate sliding doors moment.
Totally. It was either $200 or $600, depending on if you asked the mom or the dad, and Simmons points that out. Memory is tricky like that, but either way, it was a significant chunk of change for them at the time. And the dad has a plan. He wants a motorcycle.
Of course he does. I mean, he's young, he's stressed, he's studying law all night. He wants to feel the wind in his hair. He wants a sense of freedom.
But the mom is the unspoken hero of this entire story. Really, she puts her foot down. She says, essentially, if you buy that death trap, I am leaving you. She completely vetoes the motorcycle.
Smart lady. She knew exactly where that road led.
So the dad has to pivot. He has this cash burning a hole in his pocket. He loves basketball. So he calls up the Boston Celtics front office, and he asks about season tickets.
Now, for the listener today, the idea of a struggling law student calling up and buying season tickets to an NBA team sounds like a complete joke.
Oh, yeah.
You'd need a second mortgage to buy courtside seats now. It's a luxury item for corporations.
Absolutely. It's all corporate seating now.
Yeah.
But this was 1973. The NBA was not the global juggernaut it is today. It was struggling in some very real ways. It was considered a second-tier league compared to baseball. Baseball was king.
Right.
The NBA was distinct.
Yeah.
So the dad calls up, and he finds out that for $4 a game, $4, he can get a season ticket.
$4. You can't even buy a bottle of water at an arena for $4 now. You can't park your car for $20.
And these weren't nosebleed seats either. These were 5 rows behind the visitor's bench.
Incredible. 5 rows back. You can literally hear the players breathing. You can hear the coaches swearing.
So he does the math. 41 home games times $4. It fits the budget from the tax refund. He buys the ticket, and he goes home and tells his wife, I'm going to be gone about 35 nights a year.
And her reaction?
She looks at him and says, I think we got married too young.
Which is entirely fair. He just announced he's abandoning her for the entire winter to go watch sports.
But he had a loophole. He said, wait, I can take Billy. He can sit on my lap. And that right there is the moment the universe shifted. Because if the mom doesn't veto the bike, or if the tickets were $10 instead of $4, Bill Simmons probably grows up to be a lawyer or a music critic.
Right.
There is no book of basketball.
It's wild to think about, just the pure serendipity of it. So you have this kid, he's barely out of toddlerhood, really thrust into the atmosphere of the 1970s Boston garden. And the way he describes the garden, it's so visceral.
Yeah.
It's not the sanitized corporate arenas we have now with the luxury suites and the sushi bars in the concourse.
No, it was smoky. It was incredibly loud. It smelled like stale beer and sweat. It was hot. He calls it the tight shorts era.
The tight shorts era. But for a kid, it was Disneyland. Because he was so small, he had this incredible access. He describes being a miniature sports encyclopedia. The ushers all knew him. They would let him wander right down to the court during warm-ups.
He talks about chasing airballs. Right?
Yeah. Imagine this. You're 6 years old. You're standing on the famous parquet floor. Paul Silas or John Havlicek shoots an airball during pregame warm-ups. You run, grab the ball, and bounce pass it back to a literal giant. And the giant looks down and says, thanks, kid.
That creates a connection that you just can't break. You feel like you are on the team, you're contributing to the warm-up.
He even mentions getting his photo in the newspaper, the Herald American, looking up at an injured John Havlicek. He was fully part of the ecosystem. But there's a really funny and actually kind of profound side effect to this total immersion. He talks about his racial identity crisis.
Jabal Abdul Simmons. This part cracked me up so much.
It's hilarious, but it's also really telling about the culture of the 70s. So Simmons is this little white kid from the Massachusetts suburbs. But because he spends all his time at the garden, all his heroes are black.
Charlie Scott, right.
Yeah.
That was his main guy.
Charlie Scott was his absolute favorite player. But it went beyond sports, too. His favorite comedians were Flip Wilson and Red Fox. His favorite TV show was Good Times. He's consuming black culture almost exclusively because, for him, that's where all the excitement was.
He even made his mom take him to see a blaxploitation movie.
Cornbread, Earl, and me in Roxbury. Can you imagine his poor mom driving this little white kid into Roxbury in the mid-70s to see a movie about a basketball player who gets wrongfully shot by the cops?
It's amazing. It really speaks to how sports can bridge cultures, even if the kid doesn't fully understand the societal context of what's happening.
But it got to the point where Simmons was actually annoyed that he was white. He felt like it was a mistake. He felt boring. So he started renaming himself on his elementary school homework Jabal Abdul Simmons. He would color his face in with a brown crayon in art class.
The teachers must have been so confused.
Oh, I'm sure there were some very concerned phone calls home.
Yeah.
But what's interesting here is that for him, greatness was black. He didn't see race as a barrier. He saw it as the cool club that he desperately wanted to be part of. He wanted to be like Charlie Scott.
But the book doesn't shy away from the fact that not everyone in Boston felt that way.
Yeah.
And we have to talk about the racial dynamics of the Celtics in that era because it sets up why the team mattered so much to the city and why there was friction.
It's a crucial part of the history. You have the Bill Russell era, which had just ended. 11 championships, the greatest winner in the history of North American sports. But the relationship between Russell and the Boston fans was cold.
Complicated is probably putting it mildly.
Russell was a very complex man. He was operating in a highly segregated, often racist city during the absolute height of the civil rights movement. He viewed himself as a black man first, a player second, and an entertainer. Basically never.
Right.
He didn't sign autographs, he didn't smile for the cameras, he played for his teammates, not for the fans in the stands.
He famously called Boston a flea market of racism.
Right. So the fans respected him. I mean, you had to respect the winning. 11 rings is undeniable, but they didn't love him warmly. There was a distance, a real tension. But then Russell retires, and into this void steps Dave Cowens.
The big redhead.
Big red. And Simmons makes a point to say, yes, Cowens was white, and in 1970s Boston, that certainly didn't hurt his popularity. But he argues it was actually more about the style of play.
He was incredibly blue-collar.
He was pure kinetic energy. Russell was cerebral, distant, efficient. Cowens was chaos. Simmons describes him diving for loose balls, grunting for rebounds, sprinting the floor on every single possession. He played like a desperate man.
There's that great line in the book, Cowens played like a welterweight fighting a heavyweight.
Exactly. And that resonated with the Boston fans. They saw themselves and their own struggles in that effort. There's a specific story Simmons tells about a game against the Houston Rockets. A player named Mike Newlin takes a dive, a total flop, trying to draw a charge on Cowens.
And Cowens does not appreciate that at all.
No. Cowens looks at him just disgusted. And on the next play, Cowens just runs him over like a middle linebacker. He completely flattens him. And he stands over him and screams, "Now that's a bleeping foul."
That is the moment. That is exactly when Simmons' dad fell in love with the team again.
He told Bill Cowens would be worth $4 a game if he were purple. That unhinged passion hooked them. And it explains why they stayed, even when the team started to struggle a bit later on. But before the real struggle, they got to witness one of the most legendary moments in NBA history. The 1976 Finals, Game 5.
The greatest game ever played. Triple overtime against the Phoenix Suns. This is so often cited as the absolute peak of the NBA in the 70s.
It is the stuff of legend. But what I love about Simmons' retelling of it is that he demythologizes it a bit. Because from his perspective, the perspective of a 6-year-old kid, the greatest game ever, was mostly a nap.
He was asleep.
He slept through it. It was a 9 p.m. tip-off because CBS wanted the television ratings, so the game doesn't even start until well past his bedtime. And think about the crowd. It's a Friday night. The game starts at 9. The fans have been in the local bars since 5 p.m.
They were hammered.
Simmons calls it the drunkest crowd in the history of sports. He describes the atmosphere in the Garden as a prison riot, only a benevolent one. It was incredibly loud, aggressive, chaotic, and in the middle of this swirling madness, little Billy Simmons is passed out on his dad's lap.
So he misses the first overtime entirely.
Misses it completely, misses most of the second overtime too. He only wakes up because the sheer noise level in the building hits a frequency that physically vibrates him awake. He wakes up with 7 seconds left in double overtime.
Just in time for the madness.
The absolute madness. The Celtics are down by 1. John Havlicek takes the ball, drives down the side, and hits this leaning, running bank shot as time expires. The Celtics win.
Pandemonia.
Fans literally storm the court. They are hugging the players. Simmons is wide awake now thinking, we won, but they didn't actually win.
The refs had to put 1 second back on the clock.
Right. The refs realized the ball went through the net with 1 second left, so they have to clear the court. They have to get hundreds of drunk fans off the parquet floor. And in the chaos, a fan actually attacks the referee.
It's unimaginable today. You'd go to federal prison for 10 years.
Back then, it was just a spicy Friday night in Boston, so they eventually cleared the court. The Suns have the ball. Paul Westphal, the Suns player, calls a timeout. But here's the catch. The Suns don't have any timeouts left.
Which should be an automatic technical foul.
It is, but Westphal did it on purpose. It was a genius lateral thinking move. By calling the illegal timeout, the Celtics get a free throw, which Joe White makes, so the lead goes up to 2 points. But the Suns get to inbound the ball at half court instead of under their own basket 94 feet away.
He traded a point for positional advantage.
Exactly. And with that position, Gar Hurd catches the inbound, turns around, and hits a buzzer beater to send it to triple overtime.
And Simmons is just sitting there, 6 years old, watching thousands of adults completely lose their minds.
He's watching this incredible emotional roller coaster. The win, the unwin, the technical foul, the miracle shot. The Celtics eventually grind it out and win in the third overtime. But the lesson he took from that night wasn't about basketball tactics. It was about presence.
You have to show up.
You have to show up. He calls it the lottery. Being a sports fan is mostly suffering. It's mostly boring blowouts or painful losses or terrible trades that set your franchise back. But every once in a while, maybe once a decade, if you're lucky the lottery hits, you get Game 5 in 1976. And if you aren't there, you missed it forever. You can't just watch the highlights later and get the same feeling. You have to be in the room when the electricity changes.
And that philosophy, that deep need to be present just in case, is what carried them through the next few years. Because after 1976, the Celtics got bad.
Yeah.
Really bad.
Yeah.
The stars got old. The ownership situation was a total mess. They were losing a lot of games.
But the dad kept the tickets.
He kept paying the bill. And because the team was so bad, other people were dropping out of their season tickets.
Yeah.
So the dad kept upgrading their seats. He moved from behind the bench to mid-court. By 1979, they had prime seats, right next to the tunnel where the players come out.
They were perfectly positioned. They paid their dues during those dark years. And then in 1979, the lottery hit again.
The French Lick sensation. Larry Bird arrives.
Which brings us to part 3, the Bird era and the nature of connectedness. This is where the book shifts gears a bit. We move from these fond childhood memories to a real study of greatness. Because Bird didn't just win games. He changed the molecular structure of the team.
It wasn't just a gradual improvement either. They went from 29 wins to 61 wins instantly.
Instant turnaround. And Simmons focuses heavily on how that happened. He calls it the osmosis effect.
Let's get into that, because we talk about making teammates better a lot in sports.
Yeah.
It's a massive cliche. Oh, he makes guys better. But Simmons explains the actual mechanics of how Bird did it.
Right. It wasn't just that Bird was a great scorer. It was that he was a willing passer, a genius passer. And Simmons noticed something fascinating. When Bird arrived, he had teammates like Cedric Maxwell and Robert Parrish, guys who could be a little selfish, black holes on offense.
But when they played with Bird,
they changed. Simmons compares it to a comedy IQ. He uses this great Adam Carolla analogy.
Oh, right. Tell that one.
If you are at a dinner party with a genuinely hilarious person like Carolla or Robin Williams or someone, everyone else at the table naturally tries to be funnier, you up your game. You don't want to be the boring guy dragging the room down.
So Bird raised the basketball IQ of the room in the same way.
If you didn't pass the ball, you looked stupid next to Larry. If you didn't cut to the basket, you missed a wide-open, easy layup because Larry would have found you. He essentially shamed them into being unselfish. He made unselfishness the coolest thing to do on the court.
And for the fans, this created something he calls a sixth sense. I love this description so much. The buzz.
The buzz. It's a specific sound that really doesn't exist anymore in the same way. It wasn't cheering. It was a low murmur of anticipation. Simmons says that watching Bird, you stopped reacting to what just happened, and you started reacting to what was about to happen.
You could see the play developing before it actually materialized.
Because Bird saw it, and the crowd was deeply connected to Bird's brain. When he got that specific look in his eye, the whole garden knew, okay, Larry's about to do something crazy. It was a collective psychic connection.
But the problem with connection, the problem with love, really, if we want to get deep about it, is that it opens you up to heartbreak. You can't have the highs without the lows. And Simmons focuses on one specific moment that I think truly defines the trauma of being a sports fan. The missed shot in 1987.
This is the inverse of the buzz. This is the dead silence.
To set the scene for us on this one.
It's the 1987 finals, Game 4 against the Lakers. The rivalry is at its absolute peak. The Celtics are down by 1 point. There are only seconds left on the clock. And they draw up a play for Bird.
And he gets open.
He gets wide open in the corner, right in front of the Lakers bench, of all places. He catches the ball, he squares up, he releases it.
And if you watch the tape, and Simmons has watched this tape hundreds of times, obviously every single person in the building thinks it's going in.
Simmons says he would have bet his life on it. He would have bet his virginity on it. The crowd is already rising to their feet. Even the Lakers bench, you can see Pat Riley flinch. They all know it's over. It's Larry Bird. In the Garden. For the win. This is the script.
That was supposed to go in.
That's exactly what his dad said. The ball hits the back rim, it bounces out, the buzzer sounds, the Lakers win the game, and his dad just slumps down in his seat. He looks at Bill and says, "That was supposed to go in. How did that not go in?"
Yeah, it kills me.
Yeah.
Because it captures the betrayal of it. You trust the narrative, you trust the hero.
Yeah.
And then physics just says no.
That is the moment the magic died for them. Simmons argues that was the real end of the Bird era. The invincibility was gone. They went from flying first class right back to coach. And that fear, the creeping fear that the magic is temporary, that these memories fade, that is what drives the intellectual heart of this entire book.
Which brings us to part 4, the battle for memory. Why write 700 pages? It's not just to tell heartwarming stories about his dad. It's because he is terrified that we are all forgetting.
It starts with the Havlicek revelation. This is the catalyst for the whole project. Simmons is casually watching a replay of John Havlicek's farewell game on NBA TV in 2007.
Just a random Sunday morning watch.
Right. And he sees the graphic pop up on the screen. At the time Havlicek retired, he was 3rd in all-time scoring, 2nd in minutes played, and 1st in games played in the history of the league.
Those are Mount Rushmore numbers. That is an all-time undeniable legend.
But Simmons realizes nobody talks about Havlicek anymore. If you ask a 20-year-old NBA fan today, they might not even know who he is. They might recognize the name from a history book, but they don't know his game. They don't know the energy he brought.
It's true. He's just become a grainy black and white clip.
Exactly. Greatness has a shelf life. The noise fades. And Simmons sees this happening in real time with the whole LeBron James versus Michael Jordan debate.
The 48 special.
This was the famous game where LeBron scored the final 25 points for the Cavs against the Detroit Pistons in the 2007 playoffs. It was superhuman.
It was an incredible performance, unquestionably one of the best playoff performances ever.
But Simmons notices the immediate reaction from the media and the fans is to say, Jordan never did this. This is better than Jordan.
Which is demonstrably false. Jordan did stuff exactly like that all the time.
It is objectively false. But it's recency bias. We degrade the old to praise the new because the new is exciting and it's happening right in front of us. Simmons admits he fell into the trap too for a minute. He found himself wanting to push the old guys down just to lift LeBron up.
And that leads to the quote from William Goldman, "The battle to the death."
This is one of the most important quotes in the entire book. Goldman wrote, "The greatest struggle an athlete undergoes is the battle for our memories. It really is a battle to the death."
That is dark, but man, is it true.
It's the harsh reality of sports. Athletes die twice. They die when they retire and can't play anymore, and they die again when we stop talking about them. Shaq replaces Wilt Chamberlain. LeBron replaces Jordan. We can't handle the idea that the guy we didn't get to see live might actually be better than the guy we are currently watching.
Because if we admit that, we admit that we missed out.
Right. We want to believe the current thing is the best thing ever because that makes us part of history. If we admit that the best basketball actually happened in 1965, then we missed it. So we constantly rewrite history to favor the present.
So the core purpose of the Book of Basketball is to stop that erasure, to capture the noise of the garden before it's gone forever, to verify the memories so they don't just become flat stats on a Wikipedia page.
It's a vigorous defense of legacy. It's Simmons putting his foot down and saying, I was there, I saw it, and here is why it mattered. And here is the proof.
Which brings us to the absolute most unlikely setting for a deep philosophical discussion about basketball legacy. Part 5, The Secret.
Las Vegas.
Not just Vegas. The Wynn Las Vegas. Specifically, the outdoor blackjack tables by the European pool.
Which is a very polite way of saying topless pool.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
The imagery here is just hilarious. It's July 2007. It's 110 degrees outside. There are mist machines spraying water everywhere. There are distractions everywhere you look. There's this whole side story about a blonde woman promising to go topless if she hit blackjack and the chaos that ensued. I mean, it's a total circus.
It is the least holy place on earth to have a revelation.
Simmons and his buddies are there for a guy's trip mixed with some NBA Summer League work. And who does he randomly run into?
The nemesis, Isaiah Thomas.
Now, we really have to explain the beef here for the listener. This isn't just a random former player. Simmons has spent his entire professional career ripping Isaiah Thomas to shreds.
Relentlessly. He criticized Isaiah the player for the freeze out of Jordan in the All-Star game. He criticized him heavily for the white player comments about Larry Bird. And he absolutely destroyed him for his tenure as the Knicks GM, which was, objectively speaking, a total disaster.
Isaiah had actually gone on a radio show and threatened trouble if he ever met Simmons in the street.
Yeah.
So the tension is very real. Simmons is at this pool trying to enjoy his blackjack, and Gus Johnson, the legendary sports announcer, is there. And Gus takes on the role of the peacekeeper.
I love Gus Johnson. Rise and fire. He brokers the meeting. He brings Simmons over to Isaiah's table. Simmons is terrified. He genuinely thinks he's going to get punched in the face in front of a topless pool in Vegas.
But instead, Isaiah is incredibly charming. He smiles, he shakes his hand, and they end up having this fascinating hour-long conversation.
They realize pretty quickly that they are both entertainers. Isaiah's part of the show. Simmons is covering the show. They're in the exact same business.
And Isaiah actually starts explaining his bad GM moves. He explains why he traded for guys like Steve Francis and Zach Randolph when nobody else wanted them. He says he wanted to get big in a league that was rapidly going small.
And Simmons finds himself nodding along. He's listening and thinking, yeah, that actually makes sense.
Which is the danger of pure charisma. In the moment, Isaiah's logic seemed totally sound. It was only later that Simmons realized, wait a minute, getting big with lazy players who refuse to play defense is a terrible idea.
Right.
But the fact that they could even have that conversation cleared the air between them.
And once the air was cleared, they started talking about the old days. The bad boy Pistons versus the Celtics, the hatred, the intensity of those playoff series. And Simmons asks him about the secret.
This is the climax of the introduction. The secret of basketball.
What is the secret?
Well, Isaiah starts talking about the 1989 Pistons team. And he says something really profound. He says, it's not about physical skills. It goes far beyond that.
He's talking about chemistry, right?
It's not about alchemy. He's saying that you can collect the most talent in the world.
Mm-hmm.
You can have the highest payroll. But winning requires a very specific mindset.
Mm-hmm.
It requires sacrifice. It requires a connection between players that simply cannot be measured in a box score.
The source text actually cuts off right as Isaiah is explaining that the team cannot be reconstructed on a larger scale. It's this massive cliffhanger.
But the implication is clear. The secret is that basketball is an incredibly fragile ecosystem. Isaiah and the Pistons found it for a few years. The Celtics found it. But you can't just buy it. You can't just trade for it on a whim. It's something that only happens when a group of guys collectively decide that winning is more important than their own individual stats.
And learning that secret at a blackjack table, sweating through your shirt next to a topless pool from your mortal enemy, I mean, that is the ultimate Simmons moment.
It perfectly encapsulates the entire book. It's highbrow, deep analysis happening in a completely lowbrow setting. It's deep historical reverence mixed with the absurdity of modern celebrity culture. It's profound and ridiculous at the exact same time.
So let's wrap this up. We've gone from a $4 ticket in 1973 to a poolside summit in 2007. We've talked about drunk crowds, missed shots, and the terrifying fear of forgetting. What does this all mean for you, the listener?
It means that being a fan actually matters. It means that your memories, the way your stomach dropped when a shot went in or missed, are valid. They're a real part of the history of the game. Statistics are fine. They are useful for arguments, but stories are what actually sustain the sport.
And it's a reminder to pay attention, to capture the noise while it's happening right in front of you, because eventually the noise stops.
That's the haunting part. The noise stops, the players retire, and the battle for memory begins.
I want to leave everyone with a final thought on that. If memory is a battle to the death, and even a guy like John Havlicek, who played more games than anyone and was an absolute god in Boston, can fade away from the public consciousness, what happens to LeBron James in 30 years? What happens to Steph Curry?
That's a great question. Does the internet save them? Does YouTube and social media keep them alive forever? Or does the sheer, overwhelming volume of new content bury them even faster than the old guys?
Will they just become stats on some holographic screen to a kid in 2050? Oh, yeah, LeBron, he was pretty good, but no. Whoever the rookie of the year is in 2050.
It's terrifying. And it's probably inevitable. The new always devours the old.
So go watch the tape. Look up the Havlicek farewell ovation. Look up the Bird 1987 miss 3 against the Lakers. Feel that history. Because that's really all we've got in the end.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
It was a pleasure.
We'll catch you on the next one.